Hey guys, it's Suitonia here. Just thought I would do an overview for all the combat interceptors and where they are right now, both amongst themselves and how they fit in to the current nullsec metagame. One thing that I'm super happy about is that every single one of the combat interceptors all have their own virtues and playstyle while being balanced with each other. This is one of the most balanced group of ships within their own class. Combat interceptors are ships that I think are often overlooked and underestimated a lot of the time. I think this is mostly because they're really hard to find a role for in a gang once you have more than just you and someone else in fleet. If you're flying an interceptor in a gang with more than 3 people, you're probably better off flying one of the tackle focused interceptors instead of doing, an extra 150 DPS or so that the combat interceptor brings over its tackling counterpart. With that said though, I think combat interceptors are really powerful and still have a good spot in the solo nullsec roaming meta. Before we go over the individual combat interceptors, let's take a look at what every combat interceptor gets and how this affects the class overall. All interceptors have 80% reduction in the activation cost of warp propulsion modules. This means that they only use 1/5 of the normal cap use for warp scramblers, warp disruptors and stasis webifiers. This bonus benefits warp disruptors the most because they use a lot of capacitor per second for a frigate. In this video, however, I'm going to be focusing on warp scrambling brawling interceptors because I feel that's the best way to use the combat interceptors. This bonus is still somewhat useful though. And of course, the iconic interceptor bonus, the ability to be immune to non-targeted interdiction. This includes anchored bubbles, dicta bubbles and heavy interdictor bubbles. This roll bonus is really nice for evading camps, roaming more efficiently in dangerous space because you don't have to use perches or worrying about landing in a drag bubble or a camp. This bonus is also nice because it encourages your victims to have to bring fast frigates to catch you, instead of heavy interdictors and some anti-support cruisers like the Orpheus. Combat interceptors, like all interceptors, warp at 8.0 AUS per second, combined with bubble immunity, means you can very aggressively travel through space and catch a lot of people off guard and shut down vast swaths of space if they are risk adverse. It's worth pointing out that one of the most powerful bonuses on interceptors, and one that every interceptor in the game shares, is the 15% reduction in Microwarpdrive signature per level. This bonus is incredibly powerful because it is a percentage reduction, and those of you who have trained Logistics 5 from Logistics 4 will know just how powerful that is. Going from interceptors level 4 to interceptors level 5 gives you 60% more damage mitigation. Just like how, for example, if you went from 60% resistances to 80% resistances, you would actually tank twice as much because instead of taking 4/10 of damage, you'll take 2/10 of damage. So that's why it's super powerful, and it is one of the most powerful skills in the entire game, and interceptors to level 5 is definitely worth it if you plan on flying them for any serious amount of time. The brawling interceptors are going into scram range, but it's still a fantastic bonus that's great for helping you mitigate damage at camps and getting on top of sniper cruisers and things like that. The Crusader, Taranis and Claw all have an application bonus of 7.5% tracking per level, whereas the Raptor, the odd one out, has a bonus to optimal range instead. So as I mentioned, this subclass of ships is very well balanced with each other, and I think all of them are great and shine in their each and own way while still being competitive with one another. I will cover each interceptor, my favourite fit for them, and show you some gameplay from each combat interceptor. So to start off with the Raptor. The Raptor is the one that hasn't been around for all too long, and that's because it was awful until CCP rebalanced it back in early October of last year in the Oceanus expansion. The Raptor is unique in that it has 4 mid slots and 7 combined mid and low slots, where all the other combat interceptors only have 6. The Raptor does less DPS than the other combat interceptors since it only has the single damage bonus, whereas the Claw and Tyrannis have 2 and the Crusader has an extra turret built into the hull. The unique bonuses on the Raptor are 5% to small hybrid damage per level and 4% to shield resists per level on the frigate skill, and on the interceptor skill it gets 10% to small hybrid optimal range. The Raptor's main weakness is the lack of a tracking bonus, but it can compensate for that by using a stasis webifier. This also helps it with range control to get into optimal range of the Crusader and the Claw, and slow down the Tyrannis to prevent it from taking advantage of the Raptor's lack of tracking bonus. With a medium shield extender and 20% resistances from the hull, the Raptor is surprisingly very hardy, and it can take quite a bit of punishment despite being an interceptor. A good way to think of the Raptor is a Merlin which got 3 high-grade snakes and optimal range bonus, plus all the other interceptor goodies. The weakness of the Raptor, compared to the other combat interceptors, is the slower speed and lack of tracking bonus previously mentioned. The Raptor wants to brawl down the claw on the Crusader, while kiting the Tyrannis with its optimal range bonus and lowering traversal as much as possible so the Tyrannis cannot go under the Raptor's guns with its dual prop and use its tracking bonus to avoid the Raptor's optimal bonus. I would definitely recommend the Raptor to lesser experienced players, as there is much less management needed here than on the other combat interceptors, since it uses a passive shield tank, has a web, and is a little more straightforward than the others. Moving on to the Claw is a ship I think doesn't get nearly as much usage as it should, as it's a lot more powerful than people expect. However, I often see badly fitted ones too. PL Windrunner style fits that are sort of repurposed for solo or them being used as shuttles. The Claw has a lot of power grid available when fitting autocannons, which allows you to get a 200mm plate and a utility high on top of the Ancillary Rep and the highest tier autocannons. The Claw is also noticeable in the fact that it has a high base speed, low sig, and a decent buffer too. The Claw gets 5% projectile damage per level, 7.5% bonus to tracking per level on the Frigate skill, and an additional 5% projectile damage on the Interceptor skill. The Claw's weakness is a lack of range control, long reload time, and no projection bonus. Its strength is having a high combination of effective hit points, active rep, damage mitigation, and DPS. Despite being plated, it's still faster than both the Raptor and the Taranis with Microwarpdrive on. The Claw wants to orbit both the Raptor and the Crusader tightly to use its high base speed and low signature radius to its advantage, and to punish the Raptor's lack of tracking bonus. The Claw will want to kite the Tyrannis as much as possible to get as much damage into the Tyrannis before it establishes an orbit and with dual prop. The Claw is a bit more complicated to use than the Raptor, but the plate, cabless guns, and Nosferatu gives it a bit more leeway than the Crusader. The Tyrannis is the old king of the combat interceptor throne, back before the Rubicon expansion when it was by far the strongest combat interceptor, and probably the only viable one. While it now shares its place with the other three interceptors, it's still in a good place. The Tyrannis is unique in the fact that it can field 2 light drones with the 10 meters cubed of space it has, combined with dual prop, and a double damage bonus on the Frigate skill, and a tracking bonus on the Interceptor skill. The Tyrannis is capable of putting out a lot of DPS while mitigating a lot of DPS as well. The Tyrannis combines high DPS with high damage mitigation in scram range, and is one of the strongest interceptors when it comes to fighting up ship. With the afterburner combined with the Tyrannis' speed, it can allow it to go under the cruiser guns even when they have a stasis Weber fire fitted, and take advantage of other frigates which do not have a tracking bonus. Against the Claw, Crusader and the Raptor, the Tyrannis wants to exploit its superior tracking and dual prop by hitting afterburner and getting into a tight orbit. This prevents the other racial interceptors from using their longer range weapons against it. Last but certainly not least, the Crusader. The Crusader is the undisputed slingshot king, capable of going 6.5 kilometers a second with heat, that's without any implants or links. While still being a very potent brawler, a good Crusader is cause for every single kiting frigate in the game to shit their pants. The Gamma may be incredibly powerful, but it absolutely needs to respect the Crusader or it will be taken immediately to the dumpster. The Crusader has unmatched Microwarpdrive speed, and it's one of the most powerful brawlers for the speed at which it can go. The DPS is also very high with the 5 effective turrets it has. The Crusader gets 5% damage and 10% cap reduction on guns per level on the Frigate skill, and a 7.5% tracking bonus on the Interceptor skill. The weakness of the Crusader is that it's very skill intensive and requires a lot of good cap management to use effectively. You need to make every active module on your ship count. A small mistake can very easily cost you your ship in the Crusader in duels versus other interceptors. Against the Claw, Tyrannis and Raptor, the Crusader wants to kite at the edge of scram range to abuse Scorch. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you can find as much success and enjoyment out of this class of ship that I have over many years of playing EVE Online. See you all again soon.